Hello, everybody. Welcome to our next session with Lunch with the Boxer series. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have a smaller group today, so I think we're just going to go ahead and get started. We're super excited to have the Office of Accommodations and Accessibility here to answer your questions. We're going to have a short presentation from them, but we also have Denise Giesbers here today to answer some questions about orientation. I know there was an updated email that was sent out to everybody. So kind of answer some of those questions. Before we get started, if it's your first time, please make sure that your first and last name is listed so we can follow up with any questions if there are any that we can't get to today. If you hover on the bottom of the screen, there is a little chat bubble there. So if you have any questions, feel free to add in your questions in that chat box over there, and then I'll go ahead and read the questions out loud when it comes time for the Q&A. But you can also send me a private message if you feel more comfortable that way, and I'll read those questions aloud to Kim and Gracia today, and kind of get your questions answered that way. So thank you again for joining us today. So we'll actually just go ahead and get started. Can I get Kim and Gracia on here and introduce you ladies, and then you guys can do your spiel, and then we'll go from there.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, I'm Gracia Miner.
I'm Kim Garrett, and I'm the director of the Office of Accessibility and Accommodation Services. You may hear students refer to us as LSS. That was our old name. We wanted to include accessibility, accommodation, and really kind of hone in on the services that students can avail themselves of when they are in their academic pursuits. Welcome. So to get started, OAA Services works with students with documented disabilities, as well as students who may have temporary conditions that may impact their performance, activities, being able to access buildings and services, and during their academic pursuits at Pacific University. We have a pretty simple process, and I'll let Gracia tell you a little bit about our online. She does more of the online technical support for our students who need accommodations, and she then gathers that information, and then I'm the one who receives the documentation and does the eligibility. So Gracia, you want to tell them a little bit about our online?
Yeah, so the best way for students to get started with registering with OAA services is on from our website. So we have a getting started page that outlines the steps for getting registered with OAA services. It's a DocuSign form, so it's pretty easy for folks to access. You don't need any passwords or any extra information. When it's submitted, it comes straight to both me and Kim, and then the piece for and so when that is received, we always let the student know, just acknowledge we've got that from you, and then we request the medical documentation. And then the documentation from a service provider can be submitted also through a DocuSign form. The link is also on our webpage. Or it can be provided in a number of other ways that are also outlined on our website.
So we provide a lot of different services, and it is all individualized. So a student will submit their documentation, we'll take a look at that, and then we will send them a list of accommodations that are supported by that documentation. It is up to the student as to whether they want to utilize an accommodation. We always encourage them to leave them on their list, and then if they need them, they're there, and they don't have to go through the hassle of, oh my gosh, I need this, and it's not on my list. So we really prefer that they go ahead and get registered early. So I think Gina has sent you a printout. This was just a new parent orientation kind of guide sheet, so that you would have some resources, because this is going to be just as much of a transition for you as it is for your student. some of the things they were utilizing in high school or not utilizing in high school with regards to accommodations may not carry over into the college setting. So we always want you to encourage your student to register with our office, but we do know that students make their own decisions with that respect, which we really want them to transition into doing more so. So the first link is to a letter that came from a parent that I think you should read. And I too am a parent of a student with a disability, and it really helped me to make that transition to helping my son become currently now a student in a graduate program and should have his PhD by next year. So it is very possible. And no matter what the barriers are, I always tell students, you know, every single student out there is doing everything they can to be successful. So why shouldn't you? The next section talks about self-determination, and self-determination has been linked highly with academic success. So really wanting students to make this first year a transition to being knowledgeable and aware of the decisions that they now need to make. One analogy for this transition is one that I read a long time ago about being on a tandem bike. From K through 12, the parents are on the front of the tandem bike, student is on the back, parent is saying, we go here, we go there, we issue this, we do that. And then all of a sudden you're in college, and the reverse is true. The student is on front, but that doesn't mean the parent can't be in back supporting them. So one of the questions that a lot of parents ask is, well, how do I do that? Because I know they're not going to do the right thing, or I know they're not going to go here, I know they're not going to go there. So the next section talks a little bit about how you encourage, through coaching, the use of your students' executive functioning. So a lot of them have not been utilizing the frontal lobe for a long time with regards to making decisions, knowing what they need to do, knowing where they need to go with regards to their accommodations. That's kind of been taken care of for them by you. And so we wanted to give you some questions that you can ask your student that will trigger that executive functioning. We want that during that first year to transform. Basically, we want them to blossom, but be aware you are still their support. You're their basic support. Family support is so important. One last thing that I want to leave you with before we go to the question and answer is anytime you have a question, or if you wanted to submit documentation for your student, please feel free to do that. I think Gina is going to give you our email address. It will go to both me and Gracia. Once we get documentation, that spurs us to then get in contact with that student to see what they want to do with that. Sometimes when the sessions or semester starts, they may say, no, I didn't use my accommodations during my senior year, so I don't really need them. Then they go through that change, and their coping mechanisms sometimes fall apart. And after their first test or whatever, they may say, oh, maybe I do need these. So what you can do is provide that. We can get in contact with them. That way they've kind of got our connection. And then when the time comes and they're ready, then it's a much smoother system. One of the things I want to stress to you is that if you ever email me or Gracia, we will always get back to you. We will always get an answer back to you. It may not be specific to your student. It may be in general terms, but we want you to have the information that you need in order to be a good support for your student as they go through this first year of transition. So, all right, Gina, I think we could open it up to questions. I think it's always
Awesome.
good to have parents involved in that that communication. So
Yes, thank you. And I can attest that Kim in her office definitely does email. It's the one office that we know that, so, you know, give contact information. We can be hands off and don't need to follow up because you guys do an amazing job of really getting in contact with the family. So we do appreciate that in the admissions office. did have a few questions that came in. And the first one, I believe this might be more towards Denise. I'm not sure, but it was some of the questions that came in beforehand were, will there be any retrofits done inside the dorm room? And I believe this is in terms of the new COVID kind of guidelines. So I think it's Denise who'd be able to answer this question.
Well, I can answer it. If somebody else wants to, please be my guest. I saw no. So, I sit on the task force to help reopen the campus, and part of orientation and move-in, we're discussing this right now. So with the guidelines put out by the state, there is a certain percentage of square footage that is permissible and how many people can be in that square footage per residence hall room. We're very lucky at Pacific that our residence halls are, individual spaces typically are larger than other institutions, especially public institutions. And so we have actually gone in and measured every single room in every residence hall to verify if we need to switch out things and retrofit them, or if they're going to be able to be used the way they are according to the safety guidelines. Right now, there are very few that need to be retrofitted or reduced occupancy. So right now, according to the guidelines, granted, this is always fluid. That's our word for the summer, is fluid and adaptable. We will be in some of the residence halls rooms. I'm not sure if I'm speaking to mostly freshman family members or not. Those will be double occupancy, just as they would have been in normal circumstances, because it's at least the percentage of square footage, if not more. So I hope that answers that question.
Perfect, thank you. The next question that I got here, do medical records need to be submitted for the residents, including residents who don't need the accommodations? Do you know if that's something that they have to submit?
I could answer that if Kim.
Is this for housing or in general?
I believe this means it might be a general question. It came in for one of the families who can't be here today. So I think it might be a general question. Denise might be able to answer.
So all students need to submit certain parts of their medical records. The health center will send that information out, and then how to also submit it back to the university. There are certain requirements. I don't know the specifics on that, but yes, all students are required to submit certain medical information. That is different than what you will need to submit if you become a client of the OAA office.
OAA has separate as well as student athletes as well too. So my recommendation is, if you're not sure, reach out and we will make sure to get that personalized information to you. And the next question came in is, a student is asthmatic and has a nebulizer as needed. It releases a lot of respiratory droplets during use, and not sure if this is an accommodation issue, especially if there's going to be a roommate with that student. Is this something that they need to disclose, or is that something that they can just bring onto campus? How would that work out?
Well, I would say that they probably need to disclose that, because that might necessitate the need for a single room.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not quite sure. Denise, you may know a little bit more about the housing restrictions with regards to shared space, but it seems like that would increase the spray area,
Mm-hmm.
and that we might want to make sure that we get that documented, and then that way we can request a single room.
Awesome, awesome. So we'll make sure that the student reaches out. I did leave your email address in the chat box, is oaa@contact.pacificu.edu. So feel free to send that disclosure in, and then we'll kind of go from there. The next question that popped up is, what percentage of students use accommodations for reading and writing?
I was just pulling up the statistics, and so it looks like on average about 1/4 of students utilize those accommodations.
Mm-hmm.
And so those may include things like audiobooks, exam readers, scribes. So anything that might be utilized on an exam that might require the use of a reader, or text to speech or speech to text. And so the other thing is that our computer system might be a little bit off on that, because there are other reading and writing accommodations for students who may have dyslexia. There are some for individuals who may have, oh my goodness, I'm trying to think of the writing dysgraphia. And so there may be other areas where those reading and writing accommodations are being used, but they're not really tied to a specific disability.
Awesome. And how are food allergies going to be handled? Because I know right now we are planning on doing it to go kind of takeaway services, and they have to eat in the room, and their roommate has an allergy. Do we know how that process is going to look in the fall? It's fluid, I know that.
Well, I
Kim, do you
think
wanna-
housing has a food waiver process that you have to go through. And so, I mean, you're more than welcome to register with OAA. We can, facilitate that process, but that is really a housing process that they go through. So I would encourage you to connect with housing, let them know you would like to apply for a food waiver, and then they'll send you the form that you need. I don't think it's located on their website. They do use it specifically for individuals with food allergies and
So the other thing that I can tell you about food service that's happening, always our food service providers will work with students who have specific food allergy needs. And if they don't already have an option available, they'll work individually. This year, because it will be a grab and go system, if they know ahead of time what kind of allergies, they will make special arrangements. Yes, they still need to connect with housing, not necessarily to get a food waiver, but to start that process so they know, because housing directly works with our dining services. We can also send out the link to our dining services office that would also be working through those different processes with food allergies, just to give them a heads up ahead of time as people are starting to roll in.
So thank you. And another question that I have is, for students who are working with OAA, do you guys help them find specific work study positions? Is that a service that we offer through Office of Accommodations as well?
So it's not offered directly through OAA, although we do hire student workers, and we're always encouraging our students to apply. But I think that's something that's handled through the Advising Center or Career Development. I think those are kind of conjoined now. So they are the ones who have listings of all of the work study positions that are available on campus. But do know that OAA does have positions as well.
Awesome, thank you. Can a student bring their emotional support animal? Is that allowed?
Yes, we require that you register with our office. So you'd be filling out the online forms and then providing either a doctor's note, therapist. It would be the provider that is aware of the student's condition and their need for a emotional support animal. And there is a form that's available on our website. Gracia, is that form DocuSign form, or is it just on the website?
The ESA form is just on the website. It has to be printed out.
Okay. So then you could have your doctor fill that out if that's easier. And then those are submitted, and then we send a request to housing to have an emotional support animal allowed. And then housing they email the student, ask for a little bit more information about the animal so that they can make sure it's vaccinated and all of that stuff. And then they send out a contract. So we encourage them to get registered with us early, so that then by the time they get the contract and it gets approved, then they can bring their animal on site.
Awesome. And the next question is, if my son or daughter had a learning plan in place for high school for specific needs, can they do something similar at Pacific, like tutoring services? What are some of the services that are available for them?
So we have a tutoring and learning center. It's called Class. And they even have online tutoring, I believe, now. So those are available to any student. So depending on the student's documentation, we provide services from testing accommodations to low distraction testing, the ability to negotiate extensions on homework, the ability to have audiobooks. So really it's dependent on the individual's need and what's documented. But usually what we'll do is we'll take the IEP or the 504 plan from high school, and then we encourage parents to think about getting a reevaluation eventually. We know those are expensive, but if the student is planning on going to graduate school, you will want to have that updated. And then again, more than likely before they take any type of national boards, because their restrictions are 3 to 5 years, no older than 3 to 5 years. And I've never had any of them take an evaluation from high school. So just so you're aware of kind of what that process is. The other thing that we can do, if it's documented in the evaluation, is to provide what we call academic coaching. So that's kind of an extension that we provide that helps with time management, organization, and what I like to call syllabus 101. So it's taking the 5-page syllabus and helping the student to integrate that into their system, whatever that may be, paper or electronic, so that they can maintain their being on time for things, set up scheduling of study time, and so that they're not forgetting anything. So.
Awesome. Thank you. And just to kind of follow up with that, which is a great follow-up question that somebody left here, is if a student has a disability that makes communicating with different departments within the college kind of difficult, is there somebody to help them with that? Is that a service that we also offer as well?
Yes, that's a service that's included under the academic coaching. So basically, if you want to make sure that the provider understands that we really need to have that spelled out. In some cases, students have listed organizational and communication skills that they're having difficulty with, and so that's sufficient. They don't have to say the term academic coaching. They can have that, but if those are barriers, what we've been able to do is to help students with an accommodation statement to faculty that says, this student may have some difficulty communicating. If you could set up regular 1-week appointments with them during your office hours. So it kind of gives faculty a clue that says, okay, I need to be kind of the one that initiates the communication with the student. The other is that we could help them develop some templates for emails to professors. If there are, kind of common things that they need, we're more than willing to help them do that too.
Awesome. That's so great to hear. And for students who have applied for accommodation services and have a list, what is the next step after they've applied and sent in that information?
So once I receive their documentation and intake forms, along with a consent to release form, I will email them a list of accommodations that are supported by their documentation and seem to fit in with their requests. So on the initial interview form, there'll be a place for them to say, here's what I think I need, or here are some of the issues that I'm having. And so really taking those two pieces together to frame an accommodation list that will work for them. And so they'll receive that list. I will ask them to, let me know what they want to keep on there. If I've left anything out, maybe there's something they've used in the past that I didn't catch. And so really it starts that interactive process. And that's what we really want to have with them, to say, finally, here's a list that's going to help me to be successful. And then after that, I usually communicate with them, let them know that I send out accommodation notices every term until they tell me to stop. And these are uploaded to their faculty directly. they'll have a link to a box folder that will also have a copy for their records. And just really encouraging them to keep that communication going. If something doesn't work, let me know. So really trying to give them as much information as I can. I know sometimes it feels like email overload, and it is nice when they come into the office, but I will tell you, they only remember about 10% of what you tell them. Then you email them, and then they get it about another 25%. And so, yeah, and so we're really trying to encourage them to know what is next. Once those emails are uploaded, or not emails, once the accommodation notices are uploaded into their box folder, they'll again receive another email that tells them, here's how you can access your accommodations. Note taker, how do I do that? How do I schedule my exams? What if they're remote? What if they're in person? So we get them as much information as we can in that email out to them. And that's usually done 2 to 3 weeks prior to each term start. But I think we're going to go with 1 month before this semester starts, so that things are kind of more in place for them.
Awesome, thank you. And I know, so box folder is a term that you'll hear a lot on campus. It's kind of like our online data kind of storage. It's kind of like a Google Serve where you can upload documentation. It's just, it's got really tight security. I think it's like government level security, so no hackers can get in, but you'll hear the term box folder a lot when you are on campus, and it's our campus kind of iCloud. So that's what we mean when we refer to box folder. So you'll have access to that with your specific email address. And I think Denise had something to add on there.
I do. So I wear a number of hats at the university, and I work pretty closely with the OAA, sorry, I'm still getting used to that, office. And one of those things that they offer, and I'm hoping that Kim or Gracia could talk a little bit more about, are short-term accommodations. I know that I have a number of students who come in that may have had a concussion or a broken arm or have an ACL tear, and they need accommodation. So Kim or Gracia, could you talk a little bit about short-term accommodations?
Sure. I mean, we provide services for permanent as well as temporary conditions. So we tell students, I always try to tell students, you know, if it has anything to do with your functioning, let us know, and maybe we can help you. So with the different types of injuries or surgeries come a different set of accommodations. So it's really geared to what the specific need is. And we can do anything from really assisting a student in having some downtime, because I know with concussion injuries, they need some downtime. And I will say that the professors have been wonderful. They understand, and so they're able to, once they get a notice from OAA, they know that it is necessary for them to provide some kind of break in there for that student. So they're really good at doing that. We have also had students who have had to have surgery. Sometimes it's helping them gain access to their room through getting them an elevator key or whatever. We've also had some students who have had shoulder and wrist and hand surgeries during the school year, and so we can provide scribing, and then there is a way that we can, you know, hopefully get, either they're using a Mac or they can get a loaner Mac from UIS that has the speech to text on it, so it will help them to do their papers. So we're really looking at what is the functionality, how that's being thwarted, and how can we then step in and help them to fulfill whatever it is that they need to for academics. So.
And the process for those students registering with our office is the same. They still start with that step one of completing that initial interview and consent to release. Oftentimes, if it's a sport injury, then that documentation from the service provider is coming from the trainers.
Okay, perfect. That's so great to hear. You know, Kim, you kind of touched a little bit about this, you know, the student working with the professors. So one of the questions that came up is, if my student meets with his or her advisor, and will the advisor know about all of these accommodations that the student needs beforehand, and be able to suggest specific classes or professors, and focus to help with his learning style? Does that happen during advising, or will this be like an individual per professor case?
It is really to the professors. So if a student would like for their advisor to have that information, they can absolutely ask that I forward that to them. However, once their accommodation notice is in their box folder, they're free to share it with anybody they want. So they can absolutely share that with their advisor, and I would encourage that.
Awesome. And this is actually a question that I have for you guys, and this is something that comes up every year, and it's about FERPA and parents helping their students when they are on campus. FERPA stands for Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. I did have to Google that because I wasn't sure what it stood for. Once the student is on campus, there is certain information that we are and we are not allowed to share with family members, regardless of who's paying the tuition bill or how involved the parent is. And so, could you talk a little bit about FERPA and how that comes into play with maybe students who do need a little bit of that? You talked about the tandem bike with the parent behind them to help them kind of through this process.
Right. We do have some students who will sign a release for their parent, and we do have some students who do not, and that they're perfectly within their rights. So I tell students, if your parent is calling me, guess who I'm going to be calling? So if you as a parent get in touch with me and say, my student's going through this issue, what do? I can give you general information about the process, but I will be emailing your student or calling them. However I can get a hold of them to say, okay, what do you want me to do? so that that communication flow is going on. But again, I think having been a parent of a student with a head injury, it's very frustrating, and I realize that. So again, talking with your student, trying to use some of those questions. So what are you going to do about this? Because in the end, it will come down to what their decision is about having your assistance, or if they can find assistance from another place. But being able to reach out and get that when they're struggling is very important.
Has there been a system that you found has been most successful in the past for families? Is there something like a suggestion maybe that you have that you've found to be successful for students in the past?
Parents can tell me anything they want. So if you let me know that that your student, I know one year we had a student who was sequestered in their room gaming. So I was able to get in touch with the what is it called? The area coordinator for that residence hall. They were able to go what we call put eyes on. And so I think that is a process when they're residing on campus. Of course, if they're in your home remotely, that's different. But I think that is a process that really works here at Pacific. I love that because it does help us to then re-engage them and help them move forward. That's what we want.
Yes, absolutely. So the next kind of follow-up question was that what kind of form does a student need to fill out to give parent communication permission? And can the form be sent to us? So the FERPA release forms.
We have that's our consent release form that's on the online pages on our website. So there's a place for them to mark parent if they want. For students who have issues that might require calling 911, then like use of an EpiPen, or we also ask that they sign their release for CPS, because that way CPS can be notified after 911 is called, so they kind of know what's going on campus and they can assist. And then the other release is for housing. So if they need housing accommodations, they can mark that one as well.
Awesome. I just sent in the link to the site, and if you go on there, there is a list of the forms that we've talked about today. CPS is our campus public safety officers. They are very much like the parents on campus, and in fact, I know a few of them have students here as well. So they are the ones that are closest. If it is a situation where you do have to call 911, call 911, and then CPS is also nearby, and they're probably just a few hundred feet away from where your student is at. So that's what CPS is.
Absolutely. So Gina, the link that you sent for the forms, Gracia, does that also have the getting started, the online forms, the new client packet forms listed on that page, or is that?
I was just checking out the link,
Okay.
seeing that it does.
Okay.
The very first one, the initial interview and consent to release, on our getting started page, those two documents are in one DocuSign form called the new client packet.
Awesome. And I just put in the getting started page as well too. That's probably the better place to start off. So you can start at the very beginning and then kind of move your way through there. So
just because there's more information there as well.
Yeah, exactly. So just make sure to kind of go through all of those links on there. We are not getting too many other questions from this follow-up. And so I guess were there any other things that maybe you wanted to, Denise has her hand raised, I see that.
Just because I've worked in orientation for so long, these are a couple of tidbits and things that come up often. So I wanted to address FERPA, especially for students that may be using OAA and not aware that there are multiple forms that would need to be signed for different offices. That's usually a question that happens a lot. So yes, it seems like, well, I signed one of those forms. Unfortunately, we don't have a centralized system for that. So you would sign a form for the OAA office. Another area would be for the business office and financial aid. Those are separate forms. So if your student needs additional assistance and they're willing to sign those to have you have access to that, highly recommend that they do that. Another tidbit is oftentimes students decide they don't want to try and use their accommodations when they first come in. That's totally up to them, but we still recommend that they start their paperwork, because oftentimes what may happen is they're doing great, and then at some point in the middle of the semester, it's not going so great. And we would rather have that paperwork ready to go and be able to give them those services that they need at that time than waiting for paperwork. So your student has complete control over when that happens and the process of when those accommodations actually start. But to get the actual documentation in early is very helpful and beneficial to your student.
And I might also add about the FERPA form. The student can withdraw that at any point. So you might want to kind of talk with them about, initially, until you go through this first year of transition, how about we get the FERPA form signed? That way I'm there in the tandem bike behind you and helping you navigate. And so that might help them to understand that it can be withdrawn. Once they are off and flying, then, then they can withdraw that FERPA form. Absolutely.
So, and if they decide in, mid-semester that they do need the services, how long does it take from them deciding that, okay, this is something that I need help with, until they are able to get some of the resources available to them?
It does depend on how long it takes us to get the documentation. That's why I say up front, if you can get the documentation in, we've already got it. Then once the student signs the initial or fills out the initial interview form and signs the consent to release form for us to distribute to faculty, that's our first priority. So we're on it. And I would say, Gracia, if we've had everything, they're pretty much getting their faculty accommodation notifications uploaded that day, if we start in the morning, or by the next day at the latest. So we're pretty quick. We know that
is pretty quick. That is awesome. Thank you so much.
With withholding, that I'm out, or but I don't really miss any work.
Yeah, no, Kim and Gracia, I know you guys are just
we're there.
Yeah, you are, and you're doing both campuses too. And I didn't even feel that you even left campus for a little bit just because you guys have just been on it. So thank you so much. The other question, and I think this is a great question, with everything kind of being virtual right now, and the student, obviously right now especially, can't see you guys in person to make that connection. And I know that's really important, to be able to have that kind of face-to-face interaction, to make that connection for them to feel comfortable. How do we get to know you guys better then? Is there like another virtual session that we can have, or can they come by your office when they are on campus?
Right now, we're doing things virtually, and so we do have a virtual office Zoom link that was established right when we all went virtual, or went shelter in place. We still have that. We still maintain that. Right now, during the summer months, it's just me. So if I'm going to go on the Zoom office link, then I'm looking at myself, and I'd just rather not do that. But if any student would like to have a virtual meeting, they can email OAA, and I can send them the Zoom link, set up an appointment, and I've been doing that, and I'm more than willing to do that with families, and over the summer months. That's kind of when those meetings happen that are usually on site. Right now we're in level 1, and so we're being encouraged to do virtual meetings. And for some of you, you're not in the area, so the virtual meetings really help out. Yeah, once we get through this, which I'm hoping soon, but we have to take it day by day, then I think, yeah, I mean, students have oftentimes dropped by. It may be a little different system, but absolutely, we'd love to see the students
Awesome.
coming into our office. That's one of the things that I miss the most.
Yeah, definitely. And should it be like, if they are, in the fall time, if we are kind of closer to where our normal is, would it be a drop-in basis, or would you prefer that they email you ahead of time for an appointment time? What's your preferred mode of communication?
Right. My usual answer is it depends. So I would say, I mean, it's always good to set up a schedule appointment, because sometimes I'm not in the office. Gracia and I do work in 2 different proctoring centers. Mostly Gracia works in the Hillsboro, but I do from time to time, especially during the summer. Once fall term starts, I'm generally in Clark Hall. And so no, I have no problem with drop-ins, provided just following whatever the script is at the time. Yeah, I'm hoping the script is open.
Yeah.
But we all want to remain safe as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I do encourage students to make appointments, because I think it gets them ready for later on in life. They will need to have those planning behaviors. So I really encourage them to make appointments, show up on time for appointments. So,
awesome. Well, thank you so much. I don't think we have any other questions that are popping in at this time. If there are questions, please feel free to email. It's oaa@contact.pacificu.edu. And like I said, Kim and Gracia just will answer fairly quickly, so they'll get to you. And thank you so much, Denise, Gracia, and Kim, for being with us here today. Any last minute advice or things that you'd like to add in before we hang out?
I just want to tell the parents to have faith in your student. It may seem like they're floundering from time to time, but they're learning. And I think you can be an impetus to that learning and that transition, and helping them to really seize their academic, whatever they want to do, to the fullest extent. And so I encourage you to have faith in them, be patient with them, be patient with yourself, because you're going to want to just jump in and do things for them. But just kind of keep in the back of your mind, I'm on the back of this tandem bike. How can I help them keep going? All right.
Thank you.
I wish you all the best of luck.
Anything from you, Gracia?
No, I don't have anything to add.
Awesome. Denise, anything that you'd like to add in there?
you know, you'll be hearing from me all summer. So at this moment, I'm just going to say have a great afternoon.
Awesome. Thank you again for, giving up your lunch hour to be here with us, and families. Again, all the contact information is on there. You can go to our website, pacificu.edu, and even just type in OAA in their search bar, and that'll also pop up all of those links that we've sent out. And once again, next week we are going to have Stephanie Stockermer joining us today about civic engagement and about different community services and the different offices and centers that we have on campus. So we're super excited about that. And I just wanted to share again that we do have a podcast. That's kind of a nice little, segue into the different departments that we have here. Follow us on our social media and feel free to, send in your questions if, that's a little bit easier for you to get your questions into us. We'll make sure to follow through and follow up with that as well. So thank you again, everybody. Have a good rest of the afternoon, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.